Hello, I'm Sensei Alex Kakio. Thank you for joining me this evening for Meditation and Sutra Study. The title of today's talk is Hold On to Your Opinions, but Test Them Every Day. Our practice will consist of a 15-minute guided meditation, a reading from the sutra, followed by a Dharma talk. Before we get into that, please make sure you subscribe and hit the notification bell. That way you'll be notified when I post talks in the future. If you wouldn't mind hitting the like button, that'd be great too. So, like we do every Wednesday, I'll give you a moment to get into a comfortable position for meditation. The only rules is that it needs to be a position that you can hold for at least 15 minutes without moving. If you want to lay down, that's fine. However, please don't fall asleep. If you'd like some instruction, what I like to do is sit cross-legged on the floor or on a cushion, back straight, chin slightly tucked. Left hand goes palm up in the left. Right hand goes palm up over the left. Eyes can be closed, or if we want to keep them open, that's fine. We just point them downwards at the floor at a 45-degree angle to eliminate visual distractions. And we'll begin our meditation very simply with the breath. Breathing in and out through the nose. Breathing in and out through the nose engages the parasympathetic portion of our nervous system. Signals to our body that we're safe, that we can relax. Allows feelings of calm to come over us. As we're breathing on every inhale, we poke out our belly button slightly, as if we just had a large meal. And then we relax on the exhale. We'll breathe in this way for about 2 minutes. I'll keep time. No need to worry about that. And if we're wondering what to do with our thoughts, we can bring our attention to the physical sensation of our breathing. The feeling of our diaphragm expanding and contracting. The feeling of our skin against our clothes. The feeling of air moving in and out of our nostrils. Excellent. Keep breathing. Now we'll add a visualization to our meditative exercise. We'll visualize a fire burning in our belly, in the space behind our belly button. This fire burns and has the appearance of a campfire, like one we'd see in the woods, and it's our favorite color. If we like red, the fire is red. If we like yellow, the fire is yellow. This fire represents our own enlightened nature. And now we're going to feed that enlightenment within us. With every inhale, we visualize ourselves bringing oxygen into our lungs. With every exhale, we breathe out through the nose, visualizing ourselves blowing on the fire of our enlightenment, making it bigger and brighter with every breath. We breathe in air into our lungs. We breathe out. We feed oxygen to the fire, amplifying it. We'll breathe in this way for about 2 minutes. I'll keep time, no need to worry about that. And if our mind wanders, that's okay. We say hello to our thoughts and bring our breathing, or bring our focus back to our breathing and the visualization. Great work. Now as we continue to breathe in and out through the nose, extending our belly button on every inhale, relaxing on the exhale. We visualize a channel of energy going down from our belly, down, down, down to the center of the earth. And once we get there, we find an energy that's identical to our own. If our enlightened energy is blue, the earth's energy is blue. If the fire of our enlightenment is red, the earth's energy is red. Now we'll tap into that energy and slowly pull it into ourselves. With every inhale, we pull energy up up from the earth, storing it in our belly, feeding the fire of our enlightenment. And with every exhale, we continue to blow on that fire, making it even bigger and even brighter. We breathe in and pull energy up from the earth to our belly. We breathe out and we feed oxygen into that fire, blending it with the earth's energy, feeding our enlightened nature. We'll breathe in this way for 2 minutes. I'll keep time. No need to worry about that. Wonderful. And as we continue to breathe, we send a second channel of energy up from our belly, up to the tops of our head. So we have one channel of energy going from our belly down to the center of the earth. Another going from our belly to the top of our head. We breathe in and pull energy up from the earth, stopping in our belly, blending it with the fire of our own enlightened nature. With every exhale, we push that energy up past our solar plexus, past our throat, until it explodes out the tops of our head like a volcano, showering every inch of us in healing spiritual light. We breathe in energy, it comes up from the earth to our belly. We breathe out, that energy goes up to the tops of our heads and explodes like a volcano. If we had a difficult day or a difficult week, this is our chance to send healing wherever it's needed, from the bottom of our feet all the way to the top of our head. Everyone's sitting so quietly and so still. We'll breathe in this way for about a minute. I'll keep time, no need to worry about that. And if our mind wanders, we simply say hello to our thoughts and bring our focus back to our breathing and to the visualization. Excellent. It was lovely sitting with everyone today, but now it's time to bring our practice to a close. Slowly, gently, we cut off the channel of energy going to our head, sealing it off and pushing the energy down until it stops right there in our belly. Then we send our focus to the earth. Buddha reached down and touched the earth 2,600 years ago when he realized enlightenment under the Bodhi tree. Perhaps we give the earth a silent bow, thanking it for supporting us in our practice. And then we gently close off that channel of energy as well, sealing it off until there's nothing left but the fire in our belly. Putting our energy there, we remind ourselves that this energy is always there if we need to call upon it during the week. Our Buddha mind, our enlightened nature is always available to us, but now it's time to allow the visualization to fade. Finally, if our eyes are closed, when we're ready, we open them. I'll give you about 30 seconds to do that. Great work, everyone. Thank you for sitting with me. I appreciate your support as we continue to walk this path together. Now, it's time for sutra study. We'll be reading from The Center Within by Reverend Guillaume M. Kabose. Not necessarily to have a copy of the text, but it's useful if you'd like to follow along. Today's reading starts on page 31, and it's entitled Basic consciousness. The main purpose of Buddhism is to find oneself. This means to be able to go into the basic consciousness of life. Ordinarily, we move and live our daily lives only within the context of human consciousness. Likes and dislikes, good and bad, and right and wrong. We see everything dichotomized. Everything is compared to the process of competition. In such a dualistic world, we have no serenity. In order to attain serenity and real peace in life, we must go beyond the comparative world into our basic consciousness. This basic consciousness is called Buddha nature, or the world of the Buddha. What is the world of the Buddha? Consider an analogy of waves on a lake. The waves appear and disappear according to conditions and causes of each moment. However, deep in the water, serenity prevails. Deeper the water, the more serene it is. The surface of your daily life is like the waves. It continually appears and disappears according to where you are and what you are doing. However, deep within your life, there is a world of basic consciousness that external commotion cannot disturb, and where you can maintain peace and serenity in all things. Although you do live in a relative world with a spouse, friends, and fellow workers, the important thing is for subject and object to be harmonized, to become one. Each word, action, and thought comes from the basic consciousness where all life is one. Your life can be smooth, peaceful, and calm in spite of the many things you deal with. In the relative world, there are anger, greediness, and many idle complaints. Being human, you have negative emotions. But if you are aware, you can always return to basic consciousness. Through study and discipline, you can overcome your petty self and realize this basic consciousness, which is the Buddha nature within all of us. Reverend Gilmay always says so much, and yet somehow I always want him to say more. So there is an idea, a question floating around in Buddhist communities right now about the role that Buddhists should play in daily life. Specifically around whether or not we should have opinions, whether we should pick sides, whether ideas like right and wrong exist, or if anything, everything's just relative. A lot of this comes down to a misunderstanding of the teaching of emptiness. This idea that everything is an illusion, therefore nothing is worth us worrying about. But this is incorrect. The teaching of emptiness is not a teaching of nothingness, it's a teaching of everythingness, a teaching of interconnectedness. And based on our understanding of that interconnectedness, we are able to make decisions. We can choose right from wrong. We can determine what's the correct course of action to take in daily life. To give you an example, when I was apprenticing, I was working on a farm in upstate New York. And I had two jobs there primarily. I was responsible for the orchard, so I took care of the cherry trees and the pear trees and the blackberry bushes. And I was also responsible for a flock of chickens that we had on the property. And their setup was fairly simple. There was a barn that they roosted in at night. And every morning I'd go out and I'd open up the barn doors, and then there was a pasture area that they had access to. So they can go in and out as they please throughout the day. And that pasture area was surrounded by an electric fence. So if you imagine metal poles spaced about 3 or 4 feet apart, or plastic poles rather, and in between them were electric wires to keep predators out and to keep the chickens in. Now, while I was working on the farm, I noticed that there was a coyote on the property. It never came close, it never bothered everyone. It just, I'd see it as I was going about my chores. And I grew up in the city, so I'd never seen a coyote before. I thought it was cool. So I had a deep love and appreciation for the chickens that were under my care, and I had a love and appreciation for the coyote. It was a sentient being. It's a Buddha just like me, just like anyone else. But one day, while I was going about my work, I heard a commotion coming from the chickens. So I ran over there, and I find that the coyote is trying to get into the chickens. It wants to eat the chickens. There had been a malfunction with the electric fence, and the coyote was pulling at the wires, trying to pull the fence down so that it could get at the chickens and eat them. And in that moment, I had a choice to make. I had a coyote that was hungry, that wanted to eat, that was Buddha, and I had chickens that wanted to live, that were also Buddha. I loved the coyote, I loved the chickens. I couldn't save both. So in that moment, I ran. I grabbed a metal trash can lid that we had nearby on a trash can, and I grabbed a stick. And I ran around the electric fence to where the coyote was, banging on this trash can lid and yelling as loud as I could. And coyotes are generally very skittish creatures, so thankfully, it took off running. And I never saw it again. I have no idea what happened to it. Did I make the right decision in that moment? Was it right for me to protect the chickens and to cause the coyote to go hungry? Or because everything is an illusion, would it have been better for me to just stay back and let nature take its course? Now, that's a very specific example, but we as Buddhists have to make choices like that every day. We have Buddhas over here, and we have Buddhas over there, and these Buddhists disagree. And we have to make a decision. Oftentimes, whether we want to or not, we have to pick a side. Sometimes neutrality is an option. Other times it's not. Now, some people believe that we should remain neutral all the time, that we should stay back in our temples and our monasteries and let nature take its course. Whether it's coyotes and chickens involved or whether it's people involved. Whether it's our own homes in danger or whether it's the environment. We should never interfere. However, if we look at the teachings of the Buddha, if we look at the example, the model of behavior that he set, that doesn't seem to be true. And it doesn't seem to be true if we simply look at the story of the Buddha and his enlightenment. When the Buddha sat under the Bodhi tree, he made a vow that he would not move from that spot until he found a way to end all sorrow. So in that moment, even before he realized enlightenment, the Buddha had opinions. He saw suffering in the world and he set out to end it, wherever and however he could. He sat under the tree for 49 days without moving. And as he did this, his mind quieted. His thoughts settled. And as his mind became more quiet, something else, something beautiful, something pure, started to emerge in its place. And right before the Buddha was about to realize enlightenment, he was approached by the demon Mara. Mara is the god of lies and desire in Buddhist cosmology. And Mara tempted him. He had tried to pull him away from his spiritual path. The Buddha was tempted with the promise of wealth. He was tempted with the fulfillment of his lustful desires. And he was tempted with the promise of conquest. Remember, at his birth, the oracle said the Buddha would either be a great holy man or a world-turning monarch. The Buddha said no to all of these things. Once again, having an opinion. Once again, discerning right from wrong, despite the fact that we live in this illusory world. And finally, he was tempted with doubt. Mara asked him a very pointed question. Who are you to realize enlightenment? What makes you special? What makes you think you know right from wrong? Mara went on to say, I have an army behind me, an army who will vouch for my competence. And he did. There was a host of demons behind him, thousands in number. They bear witness for me, Buddha. Who bears witness for you? And what's very beautiful about this story, in my opinion, is that in this moment, the Buddha did not engage in a long philosophical treatise. He didn't fire off some snarky remark. Instead, he reached down, like we often do every week in our meditation, and he touched the earth. And Buddha responded, the earth bears witness for me. And in that moment, the earth shook, Mara disappeared, the morning star appeared in the sky, and Buddha realized enlightenment. He became a fully enlightened being, which in Buddhism we call Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi. That thing that had been growing, that pure, undefiled thing in his mind emerged completely. As a result, his life and the world were changed. And that thing that emerged in Buddha's mind was something very special, something we all have, something called Buddha nature, which is what Reverend Gyalme referred to in the text. Sometimes I call it Bodhi mind. This is why the definition of enlightenment, which is given in the Nirvana Sutra, is the full seeing of the Buddha body. The removal of our defilements so that our own enlightened nature can emerge in daily life, just as it did for the Buddha. And it was this Bodhi mind, this Buddha nature, this enlightenment that we all have that allowed the Buddha to form opinions. Very strong opinions, in fact, about right and wrong. And we can do the same. He was a human being. We are human beings. He had Buddha nature. We also have Buddha nature. However, and this is important, we can't always trust our opinions. Just because we think something is true doesn't mean it is. We have to test it, as the Buddha tested it. We have to separate the wheat from the chaff, the good from the bad. So how do we do this? Now that we know that as Buddhists, it's okay, in fact, it's encouraged for us to have opinions in daily life. In fact, I don't know how you'd live your life without them. How do we determine if our opinions are correct? Well, to get that answer, we can go to Vasubandhu, the Indian Buddhist philosopher born in the 4th century, and the teachings of Yogacara Buddhism. Yogacara Buddhism is at the heart of many Mahayana Buddhist schools. Both Zen and Pure Land Buddhism trace their roots back to Yogacara, which is also known as the mind-only school of Buddha Dharma. And I've talked a lot about Vasubandhu and his teachings in past videos, so I won't go too deeply into his text, the 30 verses. But if you want a more in-depth explanation of emptiness and how Vasubandhu understands our reality, you can look at my previous talk, The Existence of Buddhist Gods, where I speak about it more in depth. But in short, Vasubandhu taught that our mind functions like a garden, that karmic seeds are planted in our minds, and they ripen when the time is right. It could be right now, it could be tomorrow, it could be 10 years from now. Just like if you were throwing seeds out in your garden beds, when they get enough water, when they get enough sunlight, they grow. If they don't get enough water or enough sunlight, they don't grow. Karma is simply cause and effect. We throw a ball up into the air, that's a cause, and the action is that it'll go up for a while, and then it'll come down. All of our life is nothing but karmic seeds being planted and growing up. And we are either planting those seeds through our volitional actions, or we are responding to the seeds that have been planted by others. Some of those seeds are healthy and life-affirming: humility, charity, generosity. Those seeds are bad or downright evil, in fact. Greed, anger, etc. Now, it's important to note that we all, as human beings, have both. We have positive or skillful karmic seeds in our minds, and we have bad or negative karmic seeds in our mind as well. And this is nothing that we should be ashamed of or feel guilty about. It's no different than if we walk into the forest. Some plants provide us with shade, other plants are good to eat. Other plants, if we rub up against them, as I learned several weeks ago with poison ivy, will give us a terrible rash. Some will outright kill us if we eat them. So our job isn't to be scared of the forest, but rather to work skillfully with the plants that are there, using our own minds to determine which ones are healthy and which ones are not. Our minds work the same way. Our lives work the same way. The teaching of Buddhism isn't to remain neutral in all instances. Rather, it's to use our own wisdom to determine what's the right course of action to take. If we are put in the position where we have to pick sides, we do it with a mind of skillfulness, a mind of kindness, and a mind of humility. So, because our minds are filled with both negative karmic seeds and positive karmic seeds, we have what one could say a Mara mind and a Buddha mind, all in one. And just like the Buddha had to do under the Bodhi tree When he said no to lust, no to wealth, no to conquest, we have to figure out what to say no to and what to say yes to. Again, the issue isn't having opinions, it's determining which opinions are correct. Just as the Buddha did. So how do we do that? How do we test our thoughts, test our opinions to know which ones are good and which ones are not so good? Which will cause or end suffering and which ones will cause suffering? That's the question, because the goal of Buddhism hasn't changed in 2,600 years. It's exactly what it was when Buddha sat down under the Bodhi tree. To end all sorrow. Not just for us, but for all sentient beings. So how do we do this? How do we test our opinions? Well, there are 3 ways we can do this. In systematic theology, we have 3 items. I'll name them, then I'll tell you what they are. They are orthodoxy, orthopraxis, and orthopathos. Orthodoxy is right thinking. Orthopraxis is right action. And orthopathos is right feeling. And we can use these to test our opinions to determine if they're healthy or not. Because we should never take anything, whether it's a teacher saying it or the Buddha saying it or anyone, we should never take anything from our minds or anywhere just on face value. We always have to test it. So how do we test our opinions to know if they're right or not? Well, first we can use orthodoxy or right thinking. And there are a couple ways to do this. One is we can look at the doctrine. We can look at the sutras. What do the sutras say about this issue? Is this in keeping with the Noble Eightfold Path? Is there some other matriarch or patriarch from the tradition that had a similar instance come up in their lives? How did they respond? Now, there are some issues to this. One, it's good, this is helpful, orthodoxy, because we can get a very clear answer, right? It's right there in black and white. This is in keeping with the practice or it's not in keeping with the practice. This is coming from our Buddha mind or our Mara mind. It's right there. It's in the book. And it can help us break out of unhealthy mind states because sometimes we are caught in an angry or greedy or delusional mind state where we're just not thinking clearly. And because of that, we can't necessarily trust our own mind, so we have to rely on the doctrine. We have to rely on the text to help pull us out of that. In the same way that if our car was broken down, we might read the owner's manual to figure out how to fix it. And this is something I've experienced in my own life. Many years ago, I had a coworker I didn't get along with. And I just started my practice and my mind was very noisy, let's say. And we weren't getting along, and every day I wanted to say mean things. I wanted to talk behind his back. You know, the things you do when you're trapped in the Mara mind. But I'd started practicing Buddhism. And I had learned recently about right speech, which is the 3rd tenet of the Noble Eightfold Path. So I wanted to say mean things to this person. I wanted to talk behind their back. But orthodoxy, right thinking, going to the sutras, made it very clear, I know because I checked, that gossip was not in keeping with the path. But if I wanted to realize enlightenment, talking down to this person, swearing at them was not going to help me. That was not the right opinion to have. So I did something else instead. I wrote them a letter of appreciation, which I didn't want to do. Again, I was in a very unhealthy state of mind, but that's what the text told me right speech required. So I wrote him a thank you card. I appreciate your work in the department. I know we have different opinions, but I like the fact that you want to do the right thing, even if I don't agree. And it worked, which isn't to say that he started to do everything the way I wanted him to do it. But we started to get along better. We sat down, we had a conversation in one of the conference rooms, and we worked out our differences. So this is a situation where my opinion was wrong. I was not in the right. And it was through orthodoxy, it was through study of the scripture that I was able to get pulled out of that unhealthy mind and find a solution, a better opinion that actually helped me with my problem. So orthodoxy is good, it's helpful, but it can also be dangerous. For a couple of reasons. One, there's a lot to work through. The Buddhist canon is very vast. There are 84,000 paths that lead to the Buddha mind. There are sutras and there are commentaries on the sutras and commentaries on the commentaries. So it can be difficult, it can be a slow process to find a teaching that relates directly to the problem we're facing. In addition, it can be challenging because if we're not careful, legalism can come up in our minds. It can create a divide between us and other people, a lack of compassion, because we study the sutras, we know what they say, but these people don't. And we might get the mistaken view that they are lacking in their practice somehow. And that's not the case. Our Buddha nature doesn't change based on the amount of information we have, or the clothes we wear, or anything like that. Everyone is equally Buddha. Our ability to form and act on right opinions change, but our default should always be towards compassion. So we have to be careful that that sort of legalistic mindset doesn't come up in our minds when we're practicing orthodoxy. And then finally, there's the danger of intellectualism, which intellectualism isn't bad. But we can get to the point where we think the practice is nothing but orthodoxy, nothing but sutra study, and we don't engage in the other parts of the practice as well. So there are some dangers to orthodoxy, but it can be very helpful when we're trying to test our opinions and figure out if they're in keeping with that basic consciousness that Reverend Gyalme told us about, that Buddha found under the Bodhi tree, or if our opinions are coming from another place, from negative karmic seeds. The next way we can test our opinions is through orthopraxis, right action. And that simply means we test out our ideas, we test out our opinions in daily life, and we see if it works or not. I had a kind of a silly example of this, but I experienced this when I was working in my garden here at the homestead. There are a couple ways to grow potatoes. One way is to grow them in buckets. So you drill holes in the bottom of the buckets and you put soil in and you put the potatoes in, and as they start to grow leaves, you put more and more soil on them. So I grew potatoes that way. I also did another experiment where I grew them in garden beds. And again, as the leaves grew, I piled more soil on top of them to see what happened. What's the right opinion? What's the best way to grow potatoes? Turns out, at least in my experience, growing them in garden beds where they have a little bit more space works out better. You get bigger potatoes, you get more of them that way. The buckets worked. You can be successful that way, but we got a bigger harvest from the garden beds than we did from the buckets. So that's orthopraxis. It's simply experimenting with things in daily life and then looking at the results with a clear mind and deciding, okay, is this helpful? Is this charitable? Is this kind? Is this generous? Or did I cause suffering unintentionally for myself or other people? So we can test our opinions this way. Now, this is useful, this is good, because it gives us real world data, which is somewhat irrefutable, not totally, right? Situations change, but we can say, okay, I tried this, and this is what happened. My opinions are based on real world experience, which is very powerful. Buddhism is all about empiricism. So anytime we can get that real world experience, it is good and it's useful. But orthopraxis can also be dangerous. One, we can cause unintentional harm, like I said, during our experiments in daily life. Also, it requires a clear mind in order to see and view what's happening, right? Because if we're caught up in the mind of desire, and we're caught in that Mara mind of anger or of greed, we may not be able to see clearly what's going on. The Nirvana Sutra talks about this mind of desire, being so drunk on our wants that we can't see the world clearly. The analogy used in the sutra is a man who's so drunk that he can't recognize his own mother or his own sister. This is why things like meditation and chanting are so important, because they clear our minds so that when we're going about our days, when we're engaging in actions, we can determine if they're right or not. We can see them clearly. Finally, we have orthopathos, which is right feeling. So what is right feeling exactly? How does that work? Well, that's simply what's in our gut. What does our conscience tell us? We did something. Do we feel good about it or bad about it? We read something in the scripture. Does it resonate with us? That's our intuitive knowledge. And this, to me, orthopathos is proof that we have Buddha nature. Because if we didn't have a conscience, if we didn't have a Buddha mind, there's no way we'd be able to tell right from wrong. More than that, if we didn't have Buddha nature in us inherently, we wouldn't care about right and wrong. We wouldn't get that twinge of guilt when we do something that we know isn't perfectly correct. There'd be no effect when we stole cookies from the cookie jar, let's say. So that intuitive knowledge, that orthopathos, is very useful when we're trying to test our opinions. But there's a danger here. Orthopathos, like orthopraxis, requires a clear mind. We have to be good at weeding out those negative feelings and motivations from the positive ones. We have to know, am I feeling anger right now? And that's what's making me feel like this is right? Or am I looking at this situation clearly and I'm allowing myself to know, okay, do I feel guilty in this moment or do I feel good? And based on that, we can test our opinions. So again, the goal in Buddhism isn't to have no opinions. The Buddha had very strong opinions. Very strong. But he based those opinions on his basic consciousness, on his enlightened mind and not his Mara mind. And because they were based on his Buddha mind, if people disagreed with the Buddha's opinion, he was still able to show them compassion. Now, it's important to know, because all of these things, orthopathos, orthodoxy, orthopraxis, have positives and negatives associated with them, we never want to use just one to test our opinions. We always want to use two, hopefully three, but at least two. So maybe we do something in our life, orthopraxis, and then we check to see how we feel afterwards, orthopathos. Or maybe we read a scripture from the sutra that says we should do something, orthodoxy, and then we test that scripture, because we test everything, including the Buddhist teachings in daily life, through our actions, orthopraxis. So we always want to use at least two, if not three, of these items to test our opinions, to determine right from wrong. And why do we do this? Because again, emptiness is not nothingness. Emptiness is interconnectedness. We understand that caring about these things, determining right from wrong, is helping other people in daily life, is no different than caring for our own bodies. There's a lot of wiggle room in terms of health. How much you exercise, what you eat, how many hours of sleep you get. Lots of wiggle room. Lots of different opinions. But we all know that we shouldn't drink battery acid. We all know that chocolate cake, though it's delicious, I love chocolate cake, is not healthy for us. So it's the same when we're dealing with our physical bodies. It's also the same when we're dealing with the Buddha body, the rest of the world. We use these three items to determine what's healthy and what's not healthy for the Buddha body. We form opinions using our own wisdom, our own knowledge, and then we act on that. Now, it's interesting because Buddhism helps us do all three of these things. Orthodoxy, orthopraxis, orthopathos are all included in traditional Buddhist teachings. It's one of the beauties of this religion is that how everything is so logically coherent, how everything fits together so systematically. So we practice orthodoxy, right thought, when we do sutra study, like what we did today. And as we learn the teachings, they pull us out of those unhealthy mind states. They pull us away from those karmic seeds, that Mara mind, and they push us towards the Buddha mind, towards the positive karmic seeds, the charity, the kindness, the loving kindness, the generosity. So we form opinions based on that and not on other things. Orthopraxis, right action, is found in traditional liturgy, the bowing, the chanting, the meditation, the offerings at the altar, all right action. Also the precepts are built around orthopraxis, built around right action. That's why when we look at the Brahmasnat Sutra, which is sometimes called the Mahayana Vinaya, the rules of conduct, we are told that we must be emptied of emptiness. That's why when we look at the Heart Sutra, the first line, Avalokitesvara, Bodhisattva of compassion, when practicing deeply, the Prajnaparamita sees the five skandhas are empty and is freed of emptiness, or freed of suffering and despair. Avalokitesvara is the Bodhisattva of compassion. Compassion grows from wisdom. Right action grows from the understanding, the wisdom that we are all part of the same Buddha body. So we care for the world around us in the same way that we care for the health of our own physical body. And how do we do that? Well, there are rules for how much we eat, how much we sleep, how much we exercise. The precepts are exactly that. They are right action for the Buddha body, that we, in the same way that we might receive rules for right action for our physical body. The precepts come from the Buddha. Rules for health might come from a doctor or a physical trainer. Same thing. And then finally, we have orthopathos, right feelings, and that's found in the Brahma Viharas. Sympathetic joy, equanimity, compassionate action, loving kindness, these mind states that we're told that we need to develop in order to practice Buddhism. The meditations associated with them all go to orthopathos. So we are developing right action, right thought, and right feeling through our Buddhist practice, and in doing so, we develop right opinions. So in this way, a very healthy, very life-affirming cycle begins. We rely on Buddhism to help us form good opinions, and then we test those opinions at the same time using the teachings of Buddhism. It all fits together. So did I do the right thing when I saved the chickens from the coyote? I think I did. But I'm interested to know what you think, so leave that down in the comments. But if you take anything from this talk, take it from me, take it from Buddha, take it from Reverend Gyalme Kubose. You have Buddha nature inside of you. You have a basic consciousness, which is pure and undefiled. And you can rely on that basic consciousness, that basic goodness, anytime you feel like you need to pick sides. Anytime you need to form an opinion, you personally have all the tools you need at your disposal through orthodoxy, through orthopraxis, through orthopathos, to form the right opinion. Amitabha. So, that's the talk for today. I hope it was helpful. Just a few announcements. So this is a meditation and sutra study. It happens every Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, broadcast right here at this channel. Every Sunday, we do Dharma Sunday, which is a little less involved. That involves something from pop culture or the news. I'll do a reading from an article usually, and then I'll give a Dharma talk, giving a Buddhist perspective on the subject, tying canonical Buddhist teachings with everyday life. So that's the talk for today. I hope it was helpful. Hope to see you there. Amitabha.